Okay, welcome back, everyone. So please have a seat as you come in. Yeah, again, my name is Jawoo. I'm a senior research fellow at IFPRI, and I'm also part of ICTforAg planning team. So yeah, thanks again for coming today, joining from wherever you are around the world. So for our next sessions, actually 3 groups of sessions, we'll be talking about AI. I mean, this is it's 2024, so we cannot do this conference without talking about AI. And it was also actually specifically requested by UK government, the Breakthrough Agenda Initiative, to convene a dialogue about international cooperation and responsible use of technologies, especially AI. So it will be very timely to have this conversation today as we get together, gather together here today for ICTforAg. So this is, okay, sorry. Right. So when we were developing this agenda, so we talked a lot about responsible AI, ethical use of AI, but nobody was quite clear exactly what that means. So we wanted to find somebody who can give us a quick overview of responsible AI so that we can be on the same page. And today I'm so glad to have Rajesh Veeraraghavan, associate professor from Georgetown University, who was also one of the founding members of Digital Green, together with us. He's also the author of Patching Development. I have your book here. So she had a lot of experience of applying ICT technology, especially in the context of India and also political economy of different stakeholder groups. So we'd love to hear from Rajesh about, so tell us more about responsible AI. So Rajesh, over to you. Thank you very much.
Let me just push this. Thank you. Thank you for being here. First of all, I want to congratulate you for having this panel, because in some sense, one could say that we are at the very early stages of deploying AI technologies in agriculture. We're already thinking about responsible AI, or at least trying to understand what responsible AI is. This is particularly striking when you compare it with agriculture's own past in terms of using, one could argue, indiscriminate use of inputs like fertilizers and pesticides with a very focused goal, understandable goal of improving and feeding populations, fueling green revolution. Not having much of a debate at that point about responsible use of these chemical inputs, right? So in that sense, we should take comfort in the fact that we're already starting to think about responsible AI. I also think that given this is an ICT for agriculture panel group and conference, we should look at the lessons learned, and it's very, very clearly articulated. So we're happy to kind of be attending this panel before to kind of try and see that a lot of the lessons in some sense that people have actually already have in the ICTD community that we should go back to. In some sense, we already know how to use technology responsibly. We work with communities, farmers, farmer groups to understand what they want to use, whether they want to use technology at all, and what role does technology actually provide. I should say with the rise of data, there is a temptation, right? All of us have to eliminate all of that, right? And have a direct interface with farmers, with data being the kind of God. I think in some sense, one big takeaway, if you want to, sleep after this or go to your phones, is that it'll serve us well to recognize all the things that we just heard before the last panel when they didn't talk about AI, to recognize expertise among farmers and work with them, work with the groups that you already are working with. These technologies like AI may provide information, but in a highly unequal world, these gains from those won't be equally shared. So in that sense, AI doesn't change the game. All the lessons that you have with technology, with digital technology, with paper technology, with farm radios, all of that, you have to bring it back, right? So in some sense, that's like the main message I want to have. So when I was, the topic was given, talk about what is responsible AI, this ancient question of what is reality, right? So I said, if you look at the Vedanta, which is a kind of an ancient Indian spiritual philosophy, the answer to, one technique of answering questions that are very big is to this idea of neti, that is not this, right? So instead of understanding what is responsible AI, let's look at what is irresponsible AI, right? So that's an easy way to kind of answer questions. So I asked our friendly neighborhood ChatGPT for, hey, give me examples of irresponsible use of AI in agriculture, right? And gives me a bunch. I mean, you can go, this slide is dense, I know, but you can go, you can share the slides. You also has ChatGPT. It brings out a lot of different things. How can we approach things responsibly, right? So I'm going to highlight a couple of them. So if you're collecting soil data from just high-yielding farms, and your AI model will only be irrelevant for that context, right? Bias in data collection is a huge problem. Similarly, if you're trying to build an effective pest control mechanism through an AI, and your data set does not actually include local pest data, it would lead to an irresponsible use of AI. So local context cannot be ignored, whether you're using AI or whether you're using technology. In some sense, there's lots of ways to kind of do irresponsible AI. Why are we here? Why are we having this panel in ICTforAg thing? This is a interesting quote in the context of large language models. This is one application of AI, right? The hottest new programming language is English. I mean, of course, one could kind of pick on the word English and say that, hey, this is just English. But the idea here is that, well, you don't need to actually have to know how to program. Anybody with an ability to write a query or formulate a query can interface with AI. So there's a lot of excitement about language models and the fact that you can easily interact with English as your programming language allows a lot of excitement for AI. And what is AI and big data? Broadly, I think there's three things, right? One is there's a lot of technology, there's a lot of computing power, which is used to kind of analyze a lot of data, compare a lot of large data sets. And drawing on these large data sets to identify patterns, right? In some sense, AI is really a pattern-making machine. The third, which is usually not referred, there's a lot of mythology around it. And some people call it the snake oil. There's a widespread belief that large data sets offer a higher form of intelligence and knowledge that can generate insights that are previously impossible, particularly the tacit kind of understanding. We don't need to specify rules. AI can come out, glean it automatically. There's an aura of truth. And the next phrase, objectivity. AI is suddenly somehow objective and it's accurate. So this is a big, so mythology, while you think about technology and analysis, one thing that you should also keep in mind is there's a lot of mythology around it that one needs to be careful about. So immediately people start, this is picking on Chris Anderson here. He, a very provocative guy. It's a TED talk. He runs a TED channel. And he has this very, very provocative quote, which says, this is a world where massive amounts of data and applied mathematics replace everybody in this room, for example. Every tool that may be brought to bear, out with every theory of human behavior. No wonder a lot of academics got upset because you don't have to be a sociologist, anthropologist, computer scientist. Maybe computer scientists can be in the room. From linguistics to sociology, forget taxonomy, agronomy, ontology, and psychology. Who knows why people do what they do? The point is they do it. And we can track and measure with unprecedented fidelity. So essentially the bottom line is we just need data. Numbers speak for themselves. We just collect data. And then forget all these theories, which are all imperfect, just theories, human-made. So we don't need any of that. We just go collect more data, right? So that's the kind of mythology that exists. On the other hand, I think this is a computer scientist, Subbarao, has a kind of a slightly different view. And I don't know how many of you have heard hallucinations in language models. So instead of thinking of hallucinations as an error term, the point, what he is trying to argue is all AI utterances are hallucinations, but some may align with our reality, right? So can we tell the difference? Can you be working with farmers, can you tell the difference? So in some sense, so instead of thinking about what AI was responsible or irresponsible and giving him a lot of intelligence to it, so you think of AI as a pattern-making machine that it just hallucinates all the time. So we need to be able to be prepared to see whether it's matching reality or not. So it shifts the kind of game from looking for error terms to look at this is how AI works. So I want to kind of, I didn't know what the background of this group is. So, just a little bit of a simple flowchart of how programming works, right? How we used to do things before. We study the program, we write rules, let's say chess, or let's say you're building an interface for, I don't know, I used to work on Microsoft Word before, so if you're writing an operating system, or so you think about what you need, you write precise rules, even computer vision, let's say you're recognizing pests, so you figure out what the pest is, take pictures of it, write the ways to kind of recognize his facial features, whatnot. So you come up with rules, and human beings, in order to be able to write these rules, have to actually understand the context a lot more. And then you find out whether this works or not, you evaluate it. And so the algorithm was produced by human beings. Right? So we spent a lot of time writing code, and that's how programming was done. The game changer with AI was that you study the problem, and instead of actually writing the rules, writing the algorithms, you collect a bunch of data, and then you feed it to the AI model, where the actual algorithms that it produces is an outcome of these models. So meaning no human being actually know anything about the algorithm. They don't even understand it. I mean, it's not just me saying, I was a software developer, so I actually understand code. But if you go and get all the people in OpenAI in a room and say, okay, let's sit and understand, tell me how this pest recognition system is working, or this image recognition is working, they would not have a clue. This is not a conspiratorial argument. This is true. They don't actually understand it because they didn't write the rules for it. The rules are something the machines picked up based on the large amounts of data that you feed in. So that's why no wonder you have a kind of a desire to accumulate more and more data. Right? So if you break, I know this is a very dense slide, but how does the algorithm get produced in AI? So there's like 7 steps, right? So you have you have a problem statement, you collect a bunch of data. In fact, in this case, the labeling is done mostly for in third world countries, because that's where it's cheap. So you give it off to, you see every day nowadays, you get news articles about Kenya, Kenyans protesting that their jobs are not secure because companies are deciding to move away from labeling. Data cleaning is the idea of cleaning the data set. Then you come to this model selection, model training, model evaluation. In fact, Nitya Sambasivan wrote this wonderful paper. She used to work at Google Research. So everybody wants to do model work. Nobody wants to do data work. And data work is kind of offloaded somewhere else. And so that's a huge problem. Why is it a problem? There's a problem in terms of, obviously, pay. But there's also an important problem because problems, this article point out, problems that exist in the data collection labeling stage cascades down. So it's too late to kind of fix things if you don't fix the data. So the people who are actually getting paid are model builders, but the people who are actually doing the work are the data labelers. They're not getting paid enough. So it's a huge problem. So what is responsible AI? So there's 3 common things that people talk about. I've added the 4th, and others have also said this. Transparency, which is how is it built? Because as I pointed out, nobody knows. It's an opaque process because you feed a bunch of data in, it spits out algorithms, so nobody knows. So there's a big field called explainability to understand how this machine works, right? Fairness, who does it benefit? Accountability, what if some people, I think one of you asked the question, hey, how do you learn some things that goes wrong? Here, the question is much more pointed. Who's to blame? Right? Where do you kind of attack? Do you fault the ChatGPT creators, OpenAI, or do you fault the people who do the labeling, mislabeled your data set? And power, I didn't want to spell it out. Inside your favorite framework, right? Capitalism, colonialism, all the kind of gender, structural violence, all that exists kind of comes back. That one has to kind of not be able to let go of all those concepts that you've learned, right? So let's just walk through that very quickly. So there's a lot of attention on transparency now, This is largely driven by the companies themselves who are building it. They're saying, just like how you go to a supermarket and get, if you want to buy, like, I don't know, like my son doesn't want to look at it, but you go to a cereal and you look at the nutrition box and you find out how much sugar there is. We all now know, at least some of us, at least know to ignore or learn to see it. People are saying, well, if you're trying to kind of have a AI system make determinations based on the data set, well, we need labeling. We need to kind of know where the data set is coming from. Is it trained in Midwest American farms, large farms, or is it trained in Malawi? If so, which year? What are the kind of climate patterns that existed at the time? So we need to kind of know, give us a lot of labels about the data set. Similarly, data cards is another variation of it. And then model cards is like, well, we need to know something about the data set, but also we need to know something about what models, how these models were trained, right? What are the considerations that exist? So in some sense, people are demanding for model. And this is the one point you want to take in this slide is so it's very, you said academic. I gave you an academic slide. The point being, you can read this technically as literally about what is missing values, what are the data dictionaries, but also things. The denotative reading is what is absent, what is what is not in the data set that's not been represented, because you can't just assume the data set captures all the meanings, right? So that needs expertise, that needs context. All of you work in 20, 30 years, you know more about the context. You can't just take the data set as a given. If you want a magic wand, got responsible data set. This is not happening at this point, but I just want to put it out there. This is to say that AI could be useful. Carefully collected data sets, original context, respecting the intellectual property and privacy. A couple more slides of data creators and data subjects constructed in conversation with the relevant scientific and scholarly field, whatnot. So this is a lot to ask for. Today we're just in the Wild West. We just are kind of winging it based on data that we have. Two more slides. One big concern for working, particularly in Global South, is where data is not abundant, right? So the paper that I was part of, where we interviewed 68 AI designers, where they're going, this is AI for Good project, they're actually going to communities where they're saying, well, you talk about local data, we don't have local data, let's go get local data. So they're working with communities, working with NGOs. The mistake they are doing in the AI world is that if I put an ICT hat on, I mean, I started Digital Green, co-founded it, where you can't start something like that unless you work with a local partner. Right here, with an AI, you don't really, you just talk to an NGO head, that's what they did, and said, oh, give me data. Sitting in Seattle, or sitting in DC, or sitting in Hyderabad, or whichever capital city, they're basically telling these farmers, telling these NGO people, give me data. We will just give enough of it. Take pictures, take 2 pictures a day. And it's an extremely boring job. And we found out that, A, they rebel because they're not being seen as domain experts, they're seen as data workers. So instead of consulting with the local people, figuring out what system to be built, they're saying, take 2 pictures a day, send it to us. We will clean up the rules that is necessary. So in some sense, what we found was everybody lost. The model was weak. People felt completely not happy with this whole system. So you can check that out. So in some sense, what we need is not just information, but trusted intermediaries. We heard about interactive dashboard, storytelling. In fact, we wrote a paper on, people use the word capacity in the earlier panel. The assumption that somehow farmers and other groups are able to kind of take these data cards and contest these findings is extremely hard. So what we need is accompaniment. So very simple, like Paul Farmer had this idea, he talks about building capacity to contest these decision making that from AI. So in some sense, it's not, again, new, it's really hard. Last slide, we should step back from this automation charade. This is a quote by Astra Taylor. I'll leave it at this. Yeah, avoid technological determinism. I really like this quote. I don't want to read this out loud, but you can read it. In some sense, there is a lot of things to be gained by focusing on very simple things and not be bamboozled by these clever technologies. Thank you. Sorry, I ran a little bit out of time.
Okay, thanks so much. Okay, thanks so much for Rajesh. So we don't have time for Q&A, but yeah, I'm pretty sure Rajesh can discuss with you over the lunch break. Okay, thanks. Okay, so I'd like to welcome our panelists for the next session. Oh yeah, I have to advance my slide, multitasking. All right. So for next 30 minutes, we are going to talk about what it means for localizing AI, so especially bridging innovation and regulation. So we have distinguished panelists today. Hope they are all here. First, David Spielman. David Spielman is the Director of Innovation Policy and Scaling at IFPRI. Please come and have a seat. And Jona Repishti, Jona, are you in the? Okay, there you are. Jona is the head of Global Gender Program at Digital Green. So thanks for coming, Jona. And also Caitlin Corner-Dolloff. Caitlin is a senior policy advisor for climate and agriculture at USAID. Lastly, Patricia Zambrano. Okay, Patricia, there you are. Is the senior program manager of the program for biosafety systems and also innovation policy and scaling unit at IFPRI. Okay, great. Yeah, thanks so much for joining us today. Good. So let's have some conversation around this topic. So we all heard from Rajesh about what it means to be more responsible, ethical user of AI on these technologies. So maybe we can, so okay, so let's start from Caitlin. So considering the potential of this AI is really at global scale. So it's not just one country dominate everything. It's not happening just at the local level. I think there seems to be global connected ecosystem around this technology. So can you give us some example on how international cooperation is kind of helping to advance the responsible use of technologies?
Great, thanks, Jawoo, and good to be here. So as Dina mentioned this morning, just agri-food systems are facing unprecedented challenges, especially due to climate change. So I'm a climate change policy advisor. So I'm gonna talk about cooperation in that space. It's requiring assessing complex, dynamic, and interconnected aspects. From the climate action perspective, there are huge opportunities to leverage AI and machine learning to monitor and generate new solutions. But of course, there are risks of adverse impacts. I'd like to encourage everyone in the audience to take a look at the Inclusively Advancing Agri-Food Systems Through AI and Automation study that USAID and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation commissioned last year. So Josh right here can answer all sorts of questions on that. I won't have time to go into the details, but it includes recommendations related to regulatory and policy levers, and you can get that at usaid.gov/digitalag. In terms of AI helping to tackle some of the global development challenges, we see international cooperation as critical. Obviously, I'm at USAID. So we're seeing it as important in accelerating information sharing, foster innovation, and strengthen governance in support of smallholder farmers. For example, under the SERVIR program, which is a partnership between USAID, NASA, and leading geospatial organizations, they're strengthening partner countries' ability to understand and manage climate risks using free and open satellite data and cutting-edge technology, including AI. SERVIR's innovations have developed food security outlooks and near-time flood mapping, validated with governments and civil society to inform policy decisions and take local actions that are supporting smallholder farmers and saving lives. And I think we'll hear more about that in the program later. What I'm really here to highlight is the Agriculture Innovation Mission for Climate, or AIM for Climate, which is an ambitious joint-led initiative by the US and the United Arab Emirates that's really ramping up investment in cooperation from governments, the private sector, and academia for climate-smart ag and food systems innovation. It's a 5-year initiative. It was launched in 2021. It's already raised about $17 billion since its launch. One of the key ways that AIM for Climate is driving action is through what we're calling innovation sprints, which are efforts where the private sector, knowledge partners, and international organizations commit additional resources through 2025 to advance specific adaptation and mitigation solutions in agri-food systems. So far, there's 78 sprints. I know a lot are led by folks that are organizations that are here or part of this conference, and a historic climate smart agriculture coalition with over 600 partners, and it continues to grow. As part of this, we had a call to action for innovations to target the needs of smallholder farmers and bolster the global innovation ecosystem so entrepreneurs from low and middle income countries are empowered to create technologies and help get them into the hands of farmers. Last year, Aim4Climate partnered with Enterprise Neurosystem and open source AI software research community to host a grand challenge for leveraging the power of AI and machine learning. The winner was Agrispace, an ag tech startup by two young entrepreneurs in Chile for their innovation sprint revolutionizing remote sensing for food security. And their AgriSmart tool leverages data from NASA and the European Space Agency to help farmers maximize their crop yield using minimal water. And they're using AI and machine learning to predict water availability and usage patterns, helping governments and resource managers. Agrispace is in the process of piloting their digital ag drought and flood warning technology to benefit smallholder farmers in Tanzania. They're working closely with the government and also with UNFCCC's Climate Technology Center and Network, or CTCN. Thanks to the Grand Challenge and the new global partnerships, they'll have that AI software up on the Climate Application Hub for the UNFCCC, free to low and middle income countries. So that's just one example of an Aim4Climate innovation sprint leveraging AI. But what it shows is how international cooperation here was critical for raising the call to action, incentivizing innovation in AI and machine learning to tackle critical agri-food system challenges, for creating new partnerships between entrepreneurs, researchers, investors, public sector actors, and farmers, and expanding access, and for expanding the group of stakeholders involved in assessing how to responsibly design and deploy innovation. So I'd love to encourage everybody here to consider your own work in expanding partnerships and investing through an Aim4Climate innovation sprint. Our last deadline for the initiative is August 30th. So it's a great way to highlight your work and bring more of a focus in the global space to this and have it showcased in key ag and climate events. These types of international cooperation efforts can drive critical investments in innovation to improve the livelihoods of smallholders, while also helping to act as a bridge with the global governance fora, ensuring a wide range of stakeholders, especially farmers, are involved from inception to scaling. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks, Jawoo.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, there are many large-scale, ambitious initiatives really supporting this innovation process around the world. So yeah, really good to hear. And I'm pretty sure our audience online also taking note of the deadline and application process to take advantage of that. Okay, good. So actually one of the earlier session comment from the online audience that we didn't have time to get into that was what's the role of international aid agencies to support this innovation process. I think you kind of answered that, so thanks for that. Good. Okay, so moving on. So I'd like to also ask follow-up question to David. Now that we started talking a little bit of the role of policy and policymakers, and what will be the roadmap look like for policymakers who are both excited about the potential of technology, but at the same time are be cautious about potential harm and potential risk that might bring to my country and my people. So what kind of insight that you can share?
Thanks, Jawoo. Can you hear me? Yeah, I think so. So first of all, what do I know about AI? I have to admit, not much. I'm just waiting to get replaced. I think that's really my take on AI. I'm looking forward to it. So what should governments do? I'm an economist, so I'm going to think about this sort of in the extremes, like the corner solutions of what governments could do. So here in the U.S. especially, we say, traditionally many people say, government should get out of the way and let the market do its thing, right? Because regulation, governments, they just mess things up, right? That's a commonly held view among many. On the other hand, for those of you that have read Cixin Liu's Three-Body Problem or watched it on Netflix, show of hands, anybody? A few fans? Not enough. It's probably one of the greatest science fiction volumes out there. We could, in that, freeze all innovation. Those are the SOFONs, right? Freeze all innovation to, well, maybe forestall the singularity or just, prevent progress and advancement. So those are the two corner solutions sort of out there for us. Now, obviously, we can't do either. We have to find a happy medium. Neither are, viable solutions. So this sort of takes me as an economist again back to sort of first principles. Why do we regulate technology? It does kind of sound like a bad idea, doesn't it? Well, first of all, we regulate technology or technological progress, if you will, to address market failures, right? To account for the externalities, right? Pollution and things like that, to account for situations where, for instance, a seller has more information than a buyer, the used car market, many of you are familiar with. We also do it to instill confidence among users, right? So that we know we're using something that's not going to blow up in our face, let's say. We regulate to compensate losers in a transition process, right? Those who lose their jobs or can't move into other higher productivity jobs as a result of technological change. We use regulation to manage and mitigate risk. And we use regulation to improve welfare by ensuring access and benefit sharing for many, not just a few. So these are very consistent with what Rajesh was talking about earlier. But then there's a question of, well, how do you regulate technology or technological progress, right? And that's pretty vexing. I mean, if any of you saw the, I guess it was the congressional testimonies on regulating AI, it was painful to watch, congressmen and congresswomen who have no idea what the technology is, looking at their phones and trying to figure out what this all means. It's painful. But drawing on prior experience, it's clear that we should be learning from our mistakes, right? And I think Patricia is going to talk about, some of our mistakes, if you will, in the regulatory space around genetically modified organisms. You can think about regulating technological progress, and in how we've addressed or failed to address the role of social media, where the platforms we love to use, be it X and Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever, have effectively abdicated any social responsibility. Hey, we're just a platform, or even online retail. For those of you that shop on, with Uncle Amazon, which I do on a frequent basis, you'll notice that it's a lemons market. It has crowded in bad sellers, and all the good sellers have left, right? You won't find any of the brand names you know and love on Amazon anymore. They've all started their own platforms, Nike, Adidas, and that. And there are unknown sellers of their products haunting the corners of Amazon. That's what's happened, right? That's asymmetric information, or a lemons market. So finally, right, I'm out of time. Finally, a few points to keep in mind, I guess, going forward, and this is, again, consistent with what Rajesh was saying. We have to find a sweet spot, right? Not too much regulation, not too little regulation. We have to establish the credibility of regulators themselves, right? We have to know that regulators have the technical capability to implement regulations effectively, to consider unanticipated applications of a technology and its consequences, and that they have the functional capability to communicate their role as regulators and to interface with stakeholders like us. We have to have that accountability point, which in many cases is allowing for legal recourse, right? When the algorithm runs amok, can we take the algorithm to court? Weapons of Math Destruction was my favorite book in this area. I mean, it's very clear that, when you're denied a home loan or something because of an algorithm, you have no legal recourse. You have no recourse whatsoever, because they just blame the algorithm for discrimination and whatever. It's not humans, it's just an algorithm. And finally, we need to be able to anticipate and analyze impacts. Anticipate social and economic impacts with ex-ante analysis, with operational or process analysis, and with good ex-post analysis. So we know what we've actually gotten ourselves into. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks. So yeah, when I first approached David about this panel, yeah, he also said the same thing. I'm not AI. I'm not AI expert. I can't say anything. But no, this is actually not just about AI. When new technology enter our lives, and how this can be, uh, controlled and contained and tested and evaluated, so that it can be a useful tool in our life. So I think that there are a lot, exactly the lessons learned we can take from previous technology adoption pathways. And yeah, a lot of points you mentioned are really right on point. So very important. So let's move our attention a little bit to like user side and the farmers on the ground. So Jona has been also part of Digital Green, part of the team already. When we were just playing with ChatGPT and coming up with party tricks, and Digital Green already went ahead and started developing and piloting this chatbot for real farmer, real extension agent in India. So there must be a lot of lessons learned and kind of experience also dealing with policymakers and local governments. So yeah, if there's some insight you can also share with us.
Can you hear me? Okay. So I'm so excited to be here. I'm so excited to share some of the experience of Digital Green. So for those of you that may be less familiar with the organization, we have been working at the intersection of digital technology and helping farmers improve their livelihoods and productivity for about 15 years. And with the new kind of things that have been emerging with AI over the last year, as you said, we have been experimenting with it. So when it comes to regulation, I want to approach this conversation in a way that I want to tell you what are some of our North Stars when it comes to thinking about responsible AI, tell you a little bit about what we've been doing and what we've been learning in the ground, and then also speak a little bit about what could be those implications when it comes to broader regulation. So the first, one of our first North Stars is when it comes to AI is it accessible? And so what we have been building is a AI, generative AI solution. It's an AI assistant that's called Farmer Chat. And so this is multimodal. Users, in our case, which is extension agents or lead farmers, can use it in natural language. They can ask it questions and then help triage the challenges that farmers are facing in the fields. And so currently we have deployed this in Nigeria, in Kenya, and in India with about 13,000 lead farmers and extension agents, and they've probably reached around 300,000 farmers in turn with this advice. So when it comes to accessibility, we think, is this going to be able to reach at scale the kind of smallholder farmers that we've been caring about over the 15 years that we're working as Digital Green? And so we know that about 3 billion people in the world are not connected to technology. So even as impressive as AI can be, is how can we make it more accessible? And so we've been thinking about how to do that in Farmer Chat itself. So one of the things we've been doing is we actually use Telegram, which is akin to, for those that are not familiar, it's like WhatsApp. So it's already on a lot of phones for a lot of our users. It's something that they trust, something they know how to use, so they don't have a steep learning curve. The other thing we've been trying to do is build in different languages. So they can actually query it in their local languages. We have 5 languages, but there's a big gap between low resource languages and English, for example. So we've been actually partnering and collecting voice samples and figuring out, you know, what is that taxonomy? What are those words and the ways that these farmers express themselves, and how can we build that into our chatbot itself? So we've been working on a lot of these things to improve the digital interface and the user interface, but that is only so much that can do. What we're starting to realize is that as the system itself is exclusionary, these extension systems tend to reach more larger farmers and exclude women. Even if there is inclusion in the technology itself, it's actually not going to have that impact on a wider scale. So it's about thinking about those partnerships and that kind of regulation that can think about how do we actually make sure that it's just not making the system more efficient at being exclusionary, but actually truly. And so the things that we've been sandboxing is working with partners that actually have aligned values with us, and then learning and then figuring out how we can build those within the app itself. So that's when it comes to accessibility. The second thing that we ask is about safety. And this is a really big thing. How do we make sure that it's actually not having unintended consequences on the field? So we've been doing a lot of automated testing, checking it for hallucinations. Is it actually giving the right, like retrieving the right information and actually generating answers that are truthful and accurate. But what we're realizing is that there's a lot of loose definitions of what these tests can be. And you hear a lot about humans in the loop. But is it really that humans should be a small part of this system? Or does it need to be humans at the helm? We're actually thinking about really guiding these evaluations and doing that in a way that is accessible. And then the other thing that we realize is that these kind of leaderboards or these evaluation systems that are kind of set by these bigger companies aren't context specific to agriculture. For example, I work a lot with gender issues at Digital Green, and we did bias testing, but to send out a chatbot that just doesn't give biased advice is just too low of a barrier for people that are working in our space. So actually, when we did red teaming, which was around actually injecting adversarial prompts, of course, we tested, is this safe? Is this going to be biased? Is it going to marginalize women and their experiences? But we also asked, can it be responsive? Can it be transformative? We asked challenging questions to see if it could respond in that way. So I do think that when it comes to safety, a lot of our thinking has to be around creating benchmarks that are visible, accessible, collective, but that are also a little bit more ambitious than what is already out there. So that's a big way in how we're looking at it. And then, of course, bringing humans in the loop. And finally, the last thing that we think about, is it beneficial? There is so much around, how many users and how many times are they logging into these apps? And I think that's a lot of kind of patting yourself in the back that it's kind of the bare minimum. But at the end, we do want to see impact on the ground. And I really like sort of the angle to behavioral science and those kind of things that we talked about in the first panel, because just delivering information is not enough to kind of change the lives and livelihoods of the smallholder farmers. What else do you need to do? How else do you need to embed it in the system? And truth be told, there are these big data gaps, and we need to think about data enrichment to make sure that a lot of the tacit knowledge and things that are missing from these current chatbots and these data centers are addressed. And for this, the last thing I will say is that one organization cannot go at it alone. It's not just about retrieving data, it's making it easier for people to give data, tagging it, making these quality Q&A benchmarks to fine tune. And so there's a lot of responsibility towards digital public infrastructure. I know USAID is also thinking about that. But how can organizations that care about smallholder farmers come together, learn together, and create more robust ecosystems so we don't have to go to this alone and reinvent the wheel at a much smaller scale?
Okay, yeah, thanks so much. I mean, there are so many really important points you touched on. One thing really resonated with me is whenever I hear people saying that the keeping human in the loop, I had exact same kind of gut feeling. That's not exactly, especially in agriculture context. If somebody say AI in the loop and we are still driving the change, I think that probably make more sense. But yeah, thanks for sharing the experience and yeah, a lot of insight on that. Okay, good. So let's kind of circle back again to the policy and like even bigger level of the regional policies. So Patricia has been working a lot and studying on this recently launched EU AI Act. And again, as David briefly mentioned, Patricia has been part of the program looking at biosafety policy and biosafety programs around the world, especially in low and middle income countries. So, so as you see, as you learn more about EU AI Act, what kind of thing kind of alarms you or kind of surprise you? Or do you want to share anything about the EU AI Act and potential ramification to the audience today?
Yeah, thank you. In fact, I've been looking at the EU AI Act for quite a while, and I don't know if any of you have looked at that, and I think anyone that's working on AI should look at it, because the fact is that the EU AI Act is the EU is aiming to become the benchmark for AI regulations. And there's a need to look at that and what is it that it would imply for AI development. So I just heard about the responsible AI. When you look at the EU AI Act, they barely mention responsible AI. And I was thinking, I've been reading the different versions of the AI regulations, and they change because as different people, the AI Commission Uh, Firstly, I mean, there was a lot of negotiation between the different EU members about what should go on the text of the AI regulations. And then after the EU Commission approved it, a lot of other people, other entities have approved it. And recently the Parliament approved the last text. It's a very long text. It has like 52 pages, very comprehensive. And it's not based on responsible AI. So it's more about, it's more centered about creating, and I'm reading here, because it's human-centered and trustworthy AI, ensuring the high level health, safety, and the fundamental rights of EU citizens as enshrined in the Charter of the fundamental rights. And what are the fundamental rights? So it's a very peculiar, these regulations in general in the EU are framed within this fundamental rights. And what are the rights? There are 7 chapters of this charter that are dignity, freedom, equality, solidarity, citizens' rights, justice, general provisions. So every part of these regulations that are written are framed within which of these rights are possibly infringed and how to protect the EU citizens from this. So the part that I see very positive about this is, of course, that it ensures many of the points that were raised in the previous presentation about transparency, fairness, and accountability. I totally agree with that. The problem with this is that it sets a very high bar, as I see it, a very high bar that only that it costs a lot of money. Some have estimated that it will cost, if I'm not wrong, the EU Commission estimates that 70% of what should be spent on regulations of the total AI spending. That's an EU Commission estimate. And some other, the Center for Data Information estimated that it will cost the EU 31 billion years by 2025 to implement all these regulations. Of course, others have said, including the EU Commission, this is an exaggeration. It's not correct. But anyway, these are estimates, and we should look into that. And it's not something that it concerns only the EU, and that's why I say anyone working on this should look into this. Because as I said from the beginning, what they're trying to do is that this will become the framework by which countries design their regulations. And not only that, is because if any person or entity or whatever negotiates any agreement with an EU person in the EU, and you related to AI, you have to abide. This entity has to abide by the same principles, and that way, that's the way that they want to everyone take into account. Anyone dealing in any way with the EU citizens have to abide by these rules. So it's very important to look at this. And the other point that I wanted to make is also about the regulations. What are the, sorry. So what are the main principles of regulations? As David said, I've been working with PBS that works on regulations. So I don't consider myself in any way expert in regulations, but I heard for many, many years what are the principles that you should, by which you should guide your regulations. And it's clarity and simplicity, one of them. If you read the EU regulations, they're very difficult in that sense of clarity and simplicity. They should be evidence-based. And I leave that to the experts. Are they evidence-based? I have asked to people who have worked on AI, and it's very difficult to come to this conclusion that they are evidence-based. Are they enforceable? I mean, because they should be enforceable. Otherwise, you should not have regulations. And are they cost effective? I already said what will cost this. And what are the implications for the global south if many of these things are not not doable? Probably what would happen, it could happen, is that only the entities or the companies that have the money to pay for this type of cost will be able to participate in the market, or in any other form, because you have to take into account that. If you look at what the law firms are doing and who work on regulations, they're very happy to help you navigate this, but it costs a ton of money. It does all this costs a ton of money that will exclude small and medium enterprises. It will exclude the startups. All of this work that you might be doing in some countries in Africa, maybe you won't be able to do it. I really don't know. You will have to ask a lawyer, but what are the implications of this? So would the question that I have, would this stifle the innovation? It's a question that it's open, that we need to answer, but really study seriously, and perhaps it won't, but we need to look into this. And it's there's a lot of things that we still need to know about this. So just I just wanted to mention
Yeah.
these few points. I know it's
Oh yeah. Okay.
so I'll
time's
stop
up.
here.
So okay, yeah. Thanks so much. So this was also very the timely and important, the clarity and what was that? The transparent, simplicity and the clarity. No, I think we probably have a bit longer way to get there, but no, that's very important area. So yeah, thanks for emphasizing that. So we don't have much time, but maybe just one question came through Zoom, or one of the Zoom audience asking, because the opening premise, I mentioned that there is a maybe global AI ecosystem where international cooperation can be really powerful. But actually, one person say, not really, especially in the concept of agriculture. There are really context specificity in knowledge models and algorithms and applications. So maybe Jona, so because you already mentioned 3 countries, this farmer chat has been kind of deployed and tested. What are the strategies to make it really localized in different countries, different kind of farming systems?
Yeah, localization and personalization, like hyper on both ends, is so critical to us. So actually, we feed it with vetted content that has been pulled from those contexts. And now we're pairing it in with kind of like market and weather data that is also really localized. General agriculture just doesn't work. So I think this is really the premise of AI. We're not quite there yet, right? Because there are still such big data gaps, but I think that is something to keep in the mind. But that shouldn't make people shy away from kind of like building more global governance structures that then can be replicated in other contexts. So I think keeping in mind the localization, because that's where it's really going to benefit smallholder farmers, but also creating just bigger collaborative opportunities and data sharing processes that can work and be transferable is I think where the direction we want to go towards.
Okay, yeah, thanks so much. So let's get back to the seat, and I will hand stage over to Charlotte. Okay, yeah, there you are for the next panel. So Charlotte is our director of communication and public affairs at IFPRI, and she will moderate the next panelist. Yeah, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As Jawoo said, I head communications and public affairs at IFPRI here. So it's a great pleasure to be here. And today we're going to, in this next panel, we're going to talk about the most important topic about where's the money? Where's the money going to go from AI? And I'm delighted to have a really great panel that I'm going to invite to join us on stage. We have Andres Ferreira with us. Andres is the data asset manager at Syngenta Digital. And he is working on global machine data integration, both with regard to, a global machine data integration platform, which is called CropWise Connect, as well as an analytics platform, which is called CropWise Analytics. So welcome to you. And then Rui, do you want to join us as well? Rui Benfica is here from IFPRI, Senior Research Fellow, who's in the Innovation Policy and Scaling Unit. And then we have a final speaker, Jae-hee Kim from the World Bank. Jae-hee is an ag economist at the World Bank working on the Africa region. And as part of her remit there, she does look at digitally enabled approaches to increase the success rates of agricultural projects in sustainable and scalable ways. Oh, we do. I'm so sorry. Please come on and introduce yourself.
Yes, hi, thanks. My name's Daniel. My name's Daniel Hamos. I'm a manager with the Strategic Initiatives team at TechnoServe. And sorry, I was a late addition, but yeah, we're working on a number of issues which I can discuss in a moment, I suppose, in the opening remarks. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So I think we've had a really interesting set of discussions this morning. I wasn't here for the entire morning, but the last panel was fascinating, but a bit vague, right? So I'm hoping actually in this panel, we get to be a little bit more specific. And I know that everybody on this panel has had interactions on AI solutions with farmers, but also other stakeholders in the agricultural space. So if I could, for starters, ask each one of you just very briefly speak about some of those interactions, some of the solutions that you have brought to farmers, and whether in fact those have the potential for making them money or not. We know farmers are asked to do all kinds of things, right? They're asked now to be sustainable. They're asked to be provide enough food for the global population. But we tend to forget often that they, in order to do any of those things, they have to make some money as well. So that's why I think it's so great that we're having this discussion today. And of course, AI has a lot of different players in it. Is the money going to go to the farmers? The other thing to keep in mind is that globally, we have seen in the last few years a real increase in food prices as a result of several crises. But even though the international prices have come down, prices remain high in many developing countries. However, and I think this is very important, that doesn't necessarily translate to more profits for smallholders, because they're actually faced with much higher input costs and all kinds of other constraints. They may still not have the access to markets that they need. So keeping all of that in mind, if you wouldn't mind giving us some concrete examples of what you've worked on and whether it has made some money for the farmers or has the potential for helping them make some money. We'll start with you, Andres, and work down the line.
I have a couple of slides.
Excellent.
Tell my story quickly. You described the old me. The new me from like December 31st has a different role, which is completely dedicated to data standards, which I've been working on for about 15 years already. So I do work for Syngenta, but I also chair a new ISO technical committee on data-driven agri-food systems. And so I was asked to sort of describe problems that U.S. Farmers have. And you mentioned the relentless increase in costs, land prices, fertilizer, seeds, all the inputs and the equipment. Seed prices have tripled in the last 20 years or so, but yields haven't gone up that much. I was talking with a grower a few days ago, and he summarized the situation by saying that a medium-sized farmer here is growing $1 million worth of stuff, using $3 million worth of equipment on $20 million worth of land that they're typically paying for in some way. And the net income that they have on that crop might be about maybe $100 an acre, so $250 a hectare. at most. So how do they make their money? Well, they make their money by marketing well. Actually, that's by playing the uncertainties in generalized knowledge of what the yields are going to be and what the supply and demand of the commodities are. But in order to be able to play that game properly, they need to have a very good handle on what their yield is going to be. Because if they make too much of a reserve for uncertainty, then they don't get to take maximum advantage of the opportunity. The really big growers can make money using other things like financial instruments like hedges, for example, right? Of course, in the global south, you have the same kinds of problems of input prices going up, a whole bunch more problems with intermediation, less market transparency, the sorts of things that Andrew was talking about earlier about trying to match the growers with their opportunities is difficult, more logistics challenges, less financing, no risk management, and so forth, right? And less access to expertise. So how can AI help? Well, I've seen that if you try to keep it simple and tackle real problems, things get better. I had the opportunity to lead the development of a comparatively simple tool within Syngenta. We're working a lot with farmer-facing technology right now and developing a series of programs. But I led this thing called the corn tools. It was basically a successive estimator of yield. They would, on their phone, whether it be Android or iOS, walk around the field taking pictures, would get, after taking enough pictures, get a pretty good estimate of what their plant density was. They do that at the beginning. And then that would reduce the spread of their uncertainty of yield. And then a little later, once they had some they had kernels set on the ears, they'd be able to go out again and take pictures of the ears of corn and estimate the kernels. And then again, their yield would become less uncertain. And then with some what-if analysis about the mass or volume per kernel, they would get a yield estimate. And they thought this was great. Our field staff, our growers, our grower collaborators thought that was a great tool. They voted it their favorite tool a couple of years in a row. And it was a great discussion support tool. It was narrowly scoped, well-trained, and it was verifiably accurate. In the global south, I think that standards and helpful e-infrastructure may be as helpful or even more helpful than AI. So how do you go from individual projects to widespread use of something? I think that data standards can help, and that's why I'm involved in ISO right now. For things like price formation transparency and clearing houses to buy and sell value-added products and so forth. And of course, to amplify the reach of the agronomist, right? Going back to how does the human participate in the loop? Agronomists are a very scarce resource. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Andres. Really interesting. Your example is, of course, focusing very much on US farmers. So let's see if our next speaker can also address maybe the farmers in the global south. Rui, over to you.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Glad to be here. Just like David in the previous panel, I told Jawoo about the AI person, I'm an economist. So he said, oh, great, let's have an economist in the panel. So I do not have a very specific example, but I'm going to focus on key challenges, key opportunities and challenges for farmers in the Sub-Saharan Africa, where my research has actually focused mostly. I see basically two ways that AI and ICTs in general, digital technologies that can actually help farmers. One is overcoming isolation. Overcoming isolation means improving their ability to actually connect with markets, inputs, output markets, financial markets, that actually leads to what you actually highlighted about the cost minimization to actually make farming profitable. The second one is the ability to actually accelerate through digital extension. Catherine and others this morning were talking about that. Because with the amounting of data that allows for machine learning and and the ability to actually learn and inform extension information, there is also the ability of farmers to actually take advantage of that and expand their production and minimizing costs and increasing profits. AI more specifically, I think it can actually help to a great extent because as you have more information, as you have more timely information on that can actually help inform the production cycles and decisions of farmers in terms of application of inputs, in terms of the right time to actually do the harvesting, etc. So this is really a potential great benefit of AI. On the other hand, the use of robotics is a potential use for fertilizer applications, for weeding, for harvesting, which can actually help substitute unskilled labor in this context. We also talk about the use of remote sensing and connected sensors to help inform these kinds of decisions in the process. One thing I would like to highlight here, these are all opportunities, but in the context of the global south, particularly sub-Saharan Africa, it's also important to talk about the challenges. And one key challenge of the AI comes actually to the fact that AI has a very high potential to actually exacerbate some of the existing gaps, both between more developed countries and less developed countries, as well as in the specific rural context. Just using a country analogy, one of these widening of the gaps actually comes to the fact that a certain set of countries actually starts with an advantage in terms of use of robotics, for example. And what happens is that they're able to actually minimize costs and further mobilize resources towards investing in those same robotic technologies, while other countries that haven't really started, were actually to a great extent waiting on the benefits of a demographic dividend. Most of the countries in the global south, mainly sub-Saharan Africa, and the youth bulge, and the idea was, with China graduating, they would build this great opportunity for labor-intensive, unskilled labor to be actually used, and countries taking advantage of expanding production and being the future suppliers. But the fact is that with AI, if they fall behind, there will be a situation where cost reduction is going to happen in certain markets. Market share of the countries that already have the advantage is going to increase. The wages of the unskilled labor, that is what they have in excess, is actually going to be depressed, and prices are going to be lower. So it's going to be very hard for those countries to actually compete. And moving to a kind of rural setting, what we see also is that there's a heterogeneity of farmers. So the ability to actually benefit from the potential of the AI and then digital technologies in general is probably skewed towards the better off farmers. And there will be a situation where those will, just like the example of the countries I gave, the smaller ones and the less capable ones can actually fall behind. So there will be a great necessity for the countries to actually upgrade their labor, so that AI can come not as a substitute for unskilled labor that puts those countries behind because of the depression of the wages, but rather to be a complement to a more skilled labor or other forms of capital. So this is really, really critical. Just to end, acknowledging these kinds of challenges, I would say that it's going to be important for farmers to adopt those kinds of technologies, particularly related to remote sensing, to the connected sensors, as well as to the mechanization, through robotization to the extent possible. But and also the ability to make the markets more transparent and the opportunities for interaction between producers and marketing or processing or even the ultimate markets be better, so that costs can actually be minimized. There is a set of structural challenges also that have to do with the access to ICTs. And in the first section this morning, people started talking about that, is basically the digital divides and infrastructure gaps, basically. So geographic coverage is very low. It's estimated that in sub-Saharan Africa, only about 10% of rural people have access to the internet in the rural areas, against say 28% in urban areas. The cost of connectivity are very high. So, sometimes we are here, we think everybody has a cell phone, has continuous access to the internet and be able to connect. That's not true. There are gender gaps as well that can be need to be overcome, and also the challenge of other infrastructure investments such as electrification. So a business case has to be made for the necessary the right policies and investments to make a joint investment in electrification and digital infrastructure. So this is going to be quite critical to be able to advance. And finally, I would say that digital technologies and AI in general is not very democratizing. So if you don't do these things, it can actually generate further disparities in the rural space. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Ruiz. So I hear from our first two speakers that the technology has the great potential, perhaps, to help smallholders sort of leapfrog into a whole new way of working. However, it also carries a real risk of sort of exacerbating the exclusionary aspects of the systems in place right now. That was also a point made in the previous panel. So if I could ask Jahi to come in now in terms of the projects that you have worked on with the bank, how has AI, has it come into the equation already, or digital engagements, and what has been the impact on smallholders? And if I could ask both of you just to limit your remarks, so I do want to get to some Q&A for this session. Thanks.
Of course, happily. First of all, my name is Jihei. I want to just correct that. Sorry if I'm being impolite, but Jihei is a quite common Korean name, so everyone learned. Maybe 50% of the women in Korea is called Jihei. Sorry, that was an exaggeration, but it's a very common name, and the combination especially is very common as well, like anything G and He for women, for female name. Anyway, so yeah, I lead, we call it operation at the bank. I lead lending operations in the World Bank, and I cover Sub-Saharan Africa, especially Kenya, Uganda, Somalia, quite recently Madagascar, and I'm also involved in Rwanda. So my key strategy, and I'm very passionate, and I take it as a personal mission to bring digital technology wherever I go and embed digital technologies in the design of the World Bank operation. And how I have infiltrated this is through working with the local agri-tech startups who's bringing the digital technologies and provide them patient capital through, in the marketplace of the World Bank operations, identifying them from, through the competition and challenge competitions where, startups are invited to provide solutions to the challenges that we identify, which are real challenges, we are operational challenges. And so, we give them opportunity to become our vendors for operation. So, providing capital in that sense, it's a long-term project, and we're inviting them as innovation partners, and for them to provide solutions that not only make their businesses profitable, but make smallholders' income potential greater. So I'll give you real examples of this. In Uganda, we have an input provision program through providing electronic vouchers for farmers. Farmers co-pay. However, there is a complete distrust in Uganda when it comes to inputs. So quality of inputs, you can, even think 70% of the inputs that are available in the market are either fake or they're diluted. So it was really important to put in system within the, context of our program, which is called Agriculture Cluster Development Project. I have been a task lead for this project for the last 10 years. It's actually closing at the end of this month. It's like sending my kids to college. Not that I have a kids that's college age, but yeah. So what we built is that we partnered with the local agri-tech startups who's doing digital finance, and then built in this very, very temp-free, transparent, and traceability system where farmers can be insured if the input's fake, and farmers have a complete trust in the system as they engage in the World Bank projects to get the electronic vouchers, which can cover from 90% to 50% of the input acquisition cost. So there you go. I think that risk that we mentioned about, investing in inputs, we've lessened the burden of the farmers, which then lead to a better profitability when it comes to the access to market. And in Kenya, what we've done with that, through partnering with the local startups, is that we built a platform. We launched a platform that is called 1 Million Farmer Initiative. We've partnered with Microsoft, actually Digital Green and others in this room is also involved. And that is the platform where we claim that we will build a platform that's a marketplace for the local agri-tech startups and 1 million farmers. And as of today, we have 950 and over K farmers involved in this platform. And once you are part of this platform, you are given digital ID for startups to recognize you. Your geolocations and everything related for local startups to recognize you as a client will be shared. So, from the startup's point of view, you're saving a lot of money, in identifying your market. We've discovered, I have a publication called Scaling Up Disruptive Agriculture Technologies in Africa, which was published in 2020. We've interviewed Sub-Saharan Africa digital agri-tech startups, and we found that they spent 70% over of their initial business development cost in building databases. And we thought World Bank is in a unique place where we can actually solve that problem for a lot of agri-tech startups, because I wouldn't say we have better data than the governments, but maybe sometimes we do. And that can be, processed in a way that protects the privacy data, but also give agri-tech startups a boost in terms of going to the next market. So 1 million, go back to the 1 Million Farmer platform. We have 50 local agri-tech startups linked to this platform. They also co-develop and bundle their solutions for the farmers that are also at the same time beneficiary farmers of the World Bank agriculture portfolio, which is more than $1 billion at the moment, and will be in long term. So these are the ways and strategies that I've been using. I've been sort of mainstreaming digital agriculture. And in terms of the potential of AI, where we are going from here is that we want to engage ChatGPT, like large language model generative AI system, to revolutionize extension and advisory services in places that we work, because we see a lot of value of leapfrogging from a very not modernized agriculture extension system to a customized real-time agriculture extension services. Another area, I can intervene later. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jae-hee, and my apologies on mispronouncing your name, also to the 50% of all women in South Korea, but those are really very great examples. Thank you so much. Daniel, over to you.
Is it on now? So yeah, I think I'm the 20th speaker, and I think I'm also the last person standing between you and lunch. So I'll try to be quick. So yeah, for those of you who don't know TechnoServe, we work with over 1 million farmers every year in entirely Global South. So we do a lot of work providing access to knowledge, finance, and markets. And so when we try to think about these problems around AI, I think what we're doing is always starting from the farmer business case. So we try to root ourselves in not what can the technology do, what does the farmer need, and how can we play a role in using the technology to help bridge that gap. A phrase someone mentioned earlier today was trusted intermediaries. And I think when we think about the farmer business case, that's a really useful framework by which to think about it. And so I want to just give 3 really specific examples of how we're currently piloting AI today in some of the programs that we're already doing. So the first is in Benin. We work a lot in the cashew sector. We have for a number of years now across West Africa, but in Benin specifically, we have a big program that also partners with the government. In Benin, the cashew sector is huge. It accounts for 15% of all exports. There are around 200,000 farmers who make their livelihood every year from cashew. And when we were looking in the sector, what we observed was there's actually no map or mapping of where farmers are and where there could be opportunities to optimize production, incomes, et cetera. And so we partnered with the University of Minnesota, Carnegie Mellon Africa, Epitech, USDA, and Planet Labs to actually go in and see if we could solve for this problem. What we were able to build using machine learning and AI was essentially, and I've played with the tool before, it's like essentially imagine a Google Maps with a bunch of layers, and you could layer in all existing sources of data on weather patterns, drone imagery that indicates the density of current cashew planting, and a number of different things that can help inform where the government can allocate resources to be able to, for example, in certain areas, there could be increased opportunity for more density. So we would then strategically place nurseries in those areas so that you can increase the availability of new cashew seedlings in those areas. Other areas were identified for having low yield. So we were able to then place trainers in those areas to increase the extension services that farmers could access. In addition to short-term opportunities from this that I just explained, there's also long-term opportunities from creating mapping like this. For example, in the carbon credits market, which is a space that currently smallholder farmers are entirely excluded from because it's very hard to ensure verification. And by starting with solutions like this that are only enabled by removing the very costly ground truthing of every single tree that's on the ground, you can start to create a pathway for when in the future smallholder farmers can tap into this huge opportunity of carbon credits. And then secondly is EUDR. We know that as EUDR is increasing, and this really expands to all the AI solutions that I think all of us are discussing today. If we can't figure out this traceability in the way that a large commercial farm in the US can, then it's not going to be possible for smallholder farmers in Africa to be able to sell to European markets. And we see AI as a really, really key opportunity to be able to make that possible. The second thing I want to just quickly touch on is a lot of folks have been talking about the data issue. I thought that visual was really good that you shared of where the data is a big gap. As TechnoServe, the nice thing is we actually do have pretty good data. So for over 50 years, we've been collecting a lot of data on how our programs are running, what works, what doesn't work, what's the impact on income, what practices are we training in the different programs that we're running. And what we're doing now in Honduras and Central America in some of our coffee programs is we're trying to actually learn from that data in a much more aggregated way. So rather than having someone do a 1 month, 2 month program where they go through some past projects and they say, oh, what was good, what was unsuccessful, we've actually now gone through the process of trying to tag a lot of these different programs over the 50 years of our work to try to understand what are the different specific practices, specific interventions, and specific approaches that were the most successful, and what types of impact did that end up having on smallholder farmers, so that we can be smarter and more intentional about the way we design programs moving forward. So I think just using it to kind of crawl through our existing data is another area we're going to do, and I'm just doing one more and then I'll be done. The last one is around access to market. So what we've been doing in East Africa is we worked with DataKind and Regrow Yerga to try to design a machine learning app that farmers and traders can use, where they can actually take a picture of coffee cherries and instantly get an understanding of how ripe those coffee cherries are. And what that does is it really reduces the information asymmetry that typically exists between farmer who's producing a crop, trader who's now buying the crop, and then roaster who's then turning it into finished product. And what you can do is using that algorithm, that picture, you can get a sense of what your ripeness is. And that in the future is going to hopefully be able to enable a coffee farmer to directly get paid a higher price for a more ripe cherry. And if they're not producing the most ripe cherry, then they would be able to use that information that they're getting from that picture to adjust their future planting or harvesting practices. So that's just a few specific ways, and I'll pause.
Great, thank you so much. I invite all of your questions and comments now. And maybe while you come up to the podium, or if somebody's reading questions that are coming in online, that would be great too. But a quick question for you, Andres. I mean, we heard about corn tools, right? It's clearly you're marketing the U.S. farmer in that example. And then we've heard from some of the other speakers that there is engagement with smallholders, but it's driven primarily through international organizations like the World Bank, an NGO, like, or I guess you're not quite an NGO, a development provider, you're an NGO, TechnoServe, and then also startups seem to be quite active in this space. So what is it going to take for a company like Syngenta to pivot from the very lucrative markets such as the US to smallholder agriculture? Is that something that you see coming sometime soon? Just be interested to get your perspective.
First, the corn tools is used in several countries, albeit in major corn producers, right? I think that the large companies aren't necessarily looking to make a lot of money from smallholders right now, but at the same time, they're also not competing with one another for those markets. In general, I think what we're seeing is that the problem with those places is the lack of the availability of tools, the lack of standards, so that leads to, I think, wanting to float all the boats. I'm seeing a lot of collaboration with our competitors about setting up the infrastructure, about collaborating in thinking about standards and how things can be made better for everybody, so that we can compete on our products and not necessarily who can talk to a machine or pick up some data from a degraded piece of land, for example.
So it's a pre-competitive space there in terms of sort of raising, I guess, the leveling the field. Yes, please, if you would introduce yourself briefly and ask your question, and direct it to whoever you'd like to answer the question.
Thank you. Y'all know me from before. Andrew Mack. So I'm hearing a lot of stuff that seems to be top-down, right? We're going to get a big data set, and we're going to use that as a way to reach the edge, right? What I don't hear a lot of people saying, which is what we're working on right now, which I'd love to get your thoughts on, is from the edge in. Because ultimately, the people who are the most interested in solving the problem of small agriculture are the small agriculturalists themselves, right? So we're working in two areas right now. It's on the in the lab, but moving forward really fast. One is about the ability to do price signaling. You put goods up on our platform, and you've got a certain amount of shelf life before those goods will naturally go bad. So using AI to try to figure out, are you within the band that most people are placing their goods for sale? At a certain point in time, should you be receiving a note from, using AI to say, hey, your products are going bad, you might want to price them more aggressively. The idea being that you would get pricing signals through AI that's going to get you more sales. Make sure, number one thing, if you're not selling a third of your product, is to make sure everything gets sold, right? The second one is around transportation. Transportation is a huge problem around the developing world, and it's very inefficient if I can't see what's happening. So what goes on my truck? What can't cross-contaminate? How do I make sure that my truck is filled so that I can lower the cost of transportation, so that I can lower the environmental footprint of inefficient transportation? And those are both areas that we're working on where I think AI could play a really useful role.
Great, let's collect a few more questions. Yes, Elmo has a question. The time's up, okay. That's not a question, Elmo. All right, do we have time for one more before lunch? Any burning questions out there? Yes.
Thank you. Thank you to the panel. So my question has to do with the digital divides in the Global South. Thank you, Rui, for mentioning that. I'm wondering, for anyone who's willing to answer this, what do any of your projects recognize these gaps, and what are they doing to bridge the divide between farmers who are already ahead, who are I guess, more tech savvy. And I'm thinking of this with respect to having grown up in Zimbabwe and growing up seeing commercial farmers, the large farmers, being really tech savvy compared to the smallholder farmers. And what are any of your projects addressing the existing tech knowledge that's already inherent in these countries, and maybe peer learning or something to that effect, as opposed to going back to the previous gentleman's remark, as opposed to the top-down approach? Thank you.
Okay, maybe the two of you could talk to the smallholder perspectives and digital divides question, and then you're also welcome to jump in if you like, but we need to wrap up.
So I'll be really quick, and thank you for that question. The e-voucher system that I just mentioned, there are a lot of thinking that went into that, and one of it was to really evade the elite capture, right? The digital divide, I think that goes hand in hand. So for us, within our program, if you want to be a beneficiaries, there are certain criteria to meet. And one is that you have to be within a farmer group, but even in the farmer group, if you are unable to use the electronic vouchers because you don't have a mobile phone, it becomes a responsibility of your group to provide information to you. And of course, there is an incentive structure built into that. If you're a group and then your group has e-voucher beneficiaries of certain magnitude, you are also as a group qualified to become a matching grant beneficiaries, which is the post-harvest matching grant, credit and matching grant program. So we've sort of built that into the operational design, which was a great intervention because we found that it really made sure not only the commercial farmers, but real smallholder farmers were the beneficiaries of the e-vouchers and also the matching grant.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think the more direct incentives we've always found is exactly what really addresses that. So I really like the structure of that design. So for us, just to quickly say, so we did a very broad survey of this when we were first entering COVID, and we knew this was going to become a much more acute issue, connectivity. And we find that currently about 10% of our beneficiaries have access to high-speed internet mobily. So it's a massive problem that I think we're aware of. We do offer a lot of training around trying to increase the ability for smallholder farmers to use technology. I know in Mexico specifically, we trained 25,000 smallholder farmers in a program we're running there with a large retailer to increase their ability to access it. But the honest thing that I want to just say is it is a huge challenge. And many times that moves beyond the scope of what a single program that someone like TechnoServe is executing on. And that's where we look towards partnerships in pulling together different actors to be able to address what is ultimately a very multifaceted issue, because it's not just that they can't use a phone. It's, someone mentioned earlier, lack of electricity even, then the lack of internet, then oftentimes, and this is one thing we're also excited about AI for, is a lack of being able to read or write. Because then if you can have voice activated tools that we're hoping will eventually be available in languages that are not just English and Spanish and French, which is currently what most of these large language models are speaking in. We're hoping that in this next generation of tools, as it continues to develop in the next, I think, just 5 years, we can have more languages that can increase access to more areas with hopefully increased amount of internet availability, and also be able to use only voice interaction. So it's something we're very excited about, but I think it's a huge problem.
Great, thanks very much. I'm going to give Andres the last word. He wants to say something about the bottom-up approach to taking this huge topic forward, and then let's continue the conversation over lunch.
Two very quick things regarding the bottom-up, top-down thing. At the heart of a lot of what we're talking about here is the idea of data interoperability at scale, right? We don't want to do things in very localized places many times. We need some economies of scale so that the cost can be low for the smallholders, right? And unfortunately, as an industry, agriculture and food has a disastrous data interoperability landscape, in no small part because it's grown bottom up, right? So part of the challenge here is to hybridize the bottom up nature of that beast with some top down standardization efforts, right? And to the person that asked about the smallholder and what's being done, let's talk over lunch about what the International Organization for Standardization is trying to do in that space for exactly what you asked. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks so much. So yeah, our Elmos have kind of given up, but these are so engaged and exciting. Yeah, very interesting conversation. So we just didn't want to stop. So if you have been smelling, where is the nice, very delicious food smelling from? So we have two lunch station, one this side and the other one on the other back side of the room. So please go out and enjoy your lunch. And don't forget to bring your bag and any belongings you have with you. Because we are going to split the plenary room into breakout rooms. So yeah, your things might get lost if you leave them in the room. So yeah, enjoy your lunch. Come back for breakout session. You can find the room and topics will be discussed in the agenda paper starting 1:30. So thanks so much.